Move forward. So welcome to the 2023 rate and housing forecast and what's ahead for mortgage rates. We're going to kind of go through this to see, where's the market heading for 2023 and where was it in 2022? So I think we're going to have some good news for you. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of jump into our forecast here. But before we get started, what I really wanted to do is I wanted to touch base with everybody on where are we at with our mindset right now. In 2022 was a little bit of a tough market, and it's really simple, or really easy, I should say, to get into a mindset that really isn't exactly where we need to be for 2023. We just finished a really tough year. There's times, these are the times that can define our career. Anytime I've had a tough market in the past, my mindset has always been, what can I learn from this? And then how can I create market share for myself going into the next year? So this is a great time to step up and grab market share. It's easy to kind of stay in our comfort zone, if you will, and be complacent and just kind of hope the market moves along. But if that happens, there's a really good chance we may not survive through this market. So instead of doing that, we want to make sure that we're changing our mindset from one of a negative mindset, which is really prevalent out there, to more of a positive mindset, analyzing our business and determining what we can do. And that's the whole point of what we're trying to bring here with these webinars, is to make sure that we can bring forward some ideas for you to help you guys out and move forward on your business and grab that market share and not be one of those casualties in 2023. Because quite frankly, 6 months from now, there's going to be a lot of people in the mortgage industry that just don't survive this. And the same thing on the real estate side. So we want to make sure that we are not in that category, but we are moving forward on really building our business, building our brand, and helping our clients. So last week I was on a coaching call with Tim Brahim, and Tim Brahim is a legend in our industry, and he is just an amazing person who has a great coaching company called Performance Experts now. He was a top-notch originator back in his day, but he said something on the call, and he said, there's going to be so much opportunity in the next 6 to 12 months that my head is spinning. Here's where the opportunity is right now. Every agent out there is scared. 95% of their loan partners aren't partners. What do they need right now? What do they want right now? Realtors want a partner that is smart and speaks to their prospective buyers and helps them see that right now is an excellent time to buy a home. So that really kind of stuck out to me. And as I was going through last year, again, in a tough market, there was a couple things I thought about is, as I'm going through it, am I in the right position in order to really help my realtor partners and my clients moving forward? And after 10 years of being where I was in my previous company, I decided I wasn't in the right position. So that's why I made the move to Neo Home Loans. And there's a reason for that. I've known the principles of the Neo Home Loans for a long time. We run in the same mortgage planning circles. This company was built from the ground up to help our realtor partners, to help our business partners, to help our clients, help them create wealth, reduce debt, and manage their equity. It's truly a collaborative environment about education and helping each other out and pushing each other on a daily basis. It's such a positive environment. It was a great move for me and my branch, and I think it's ultimately a great move for my clients and my partners. So when you go through these environments, these are the times where you have to kind of self-evaluate. And through that self-evaluation, there were some tough things I had to really face for myself. And this was one of them. I don't really like to move companies, but this was a necessity to do. And then I also believe that in talking with some of the principals of Neo Home Loans, that the mortgage advisor of the future is going to be significantly better at three things. One is we're going to be true advisors and not just loan officers. Loan officers will sling debt out to a client. They'll saddle their client with debt. They don't have a lot of information for the client. They don't really help the client after the fact. We want to be a mortgage advisor to our client, and we need to know and understand and be able to communicate complex ideas about real estate and financing to our referral partners and also to our clients, and do that in a simplistic manner. So advising and educating our clients will be key to our future growth and success. And we also want to have, number two, is an insanely great database with client notes, rate alerts, and are using artificial intelligence to look at opportunities for our clients. And we have that in place here. So another thing that we need to do is just, again, is we need to utilize technology to help us. And we put that technology in place, not only to help us, but to help our partners as well. And 3, we have to have more versatility in our financing tools, enabling us to solve more problems for our clients. And so recently, Neo Home Loans merged with a federal home loan bank. We're now licensed in 42 states. We're going to be licensed in all 50 states by the end of the year. And then we also can help our clients with depository accounts. If they have a business, we have a business side, and we can do business banking, and then also commercial real estate, things of that nature. The point of that is to be able to help our clients in a more diverse manner. And that's what it's going to take to survive in these markets and moving forward as we become advisors to our clients. So this allows us to be better partners, better partners to our realtors, better partners to our clients. And my commitment to you and my partners is to be the best and truest mortgage advisor that I can be for not only you, but also for our clients. So I just wanted to kind of start there before we get into this, into the slide deck as far as the forecast is concerned, because I think it's really important to make sure that our minds and our mindset and where we're moving forward to in 2003 is in the right place. So from there, let's move on to our forecast and kind of get kind of talk about where we're at right now, especially with the media. We talked a little bit about this last week, but the real estate and mortgage community is responsible for countering the negative news narrative that our clients are getting bombarded with on a daily basis. So if you go to Google, 3 of the most searched terms recently is housing crash, inflation, and recession. And this tells us where the minds of our clients are today. And we need to be able to be a voice of fact and reason for our clients in a hurricane of negativity that's swirling around them. So you can see here, this is just one of the negative headlines that our clients are seeing. And speaking of Diana Olick, so Diana Olick is the senior real estate correspondent for CNBC, and she is notoriously negative. And if we had listened to her, she's incorrectly called 7 of the last 0 housing crashes. And what I mean by that is we can take a look over the last 7 years. She's been calling for a housing crash almost every year, and it hasn't happened yet. We have 0 housing crashes. So we go back to 2015, for instance. She was saying that in October 2015, housing today, there's going to be a bubble larger than 2006. Well, if we had listened to Diana Olick, we would have lost 5.1% in appreciation and then $15,000 on average in equity gain. Now, these are national averages, so they're going to be different for each market. August of 2016, she says we're in a housing bubble. Well, not right, not really. We were at 5.4% appreciation, and we had a 17% amount of equity gain that year. In November 2017, homeownership doesn't build wealth, and she was touting this study on CNBC. Well, that year, homeowners had 6.1% appreciation and on average about $20,000 in equity gain. And in September 2018, she said it's better to rent than buy in today's housing market. Again, you would have lost out on just over 4% appreciation and $14,000 in equity gain. In July of 2019, she said the housing market is about to shift in a bad way for buyers. Again, 4% equity that year, $15,000 in equity gain. And in 2019, she said next year will be hard on the housing market, especially in these big cities. And she was talking about LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and some of the larger cities. 16% appreciation in 2019. And on average, the homeowner gained $61,000 in equity. And in 2021, she said the housing boom is over as new home sales fall to a pandemic low. 18% appreciation and about $80,000 in appreciation on the property. So if we would have listened to Diana Olick for the last 7 years, the average homeowner would have lost about $222,000 in equity. So this is what we're up against in the media right now. Is it's a constant barrage to our clients of negativity. And then we need to be able to counter that with facts and the right information to our clients. So we're still dealing with the housing crisis today, but the housing crisis isn't what the news says it is. It's not a housing crisis. It's actually an information crisis. And again, we need to be in the forefront of setting the tone, the true and proper narrative for our clients. And this is where we are, and this is why we're here today, actually. I'm not just here to share, roughly 45 minutes of some cool information. We want to make sure that we change the way you think and help provide the inspiration needed to confidently advise our clients. And if we do that, we're going to be able to have not only be able to combat the narrative of the media, but have a very successful 2023. So getting into the housing market forecast, inflation drives mortgage rates. And so what we mean by that is, and we've talked about this before, as inflation goes, so go mortgage rates. And we can see here that this chart shows a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and that's the blue line. And then we have the core consumer price index, which is the orange line or pink line, if you want to take a look at it that way. So as we follow inflation, we can see that as inflation goes, so go mortgage rates. And then you see here, there's a little bit of a dip down into in inflation. Mortgage rates didn't quite go down at that point. They lagged a little bit, but then followed inflation down again. And we see this pattern a lot. Here's an increase in inflation, a little bit down the line, increase in mortgage rates, a decrease in inflation, and rates started to come down again. And then they were about 3% all the way through. And then right around the beginning of 2021, we started to see inflation spike really hard. And then you can see as it started to rise up, and again, this is where the Fed was talking about it's still transitory. They weren't concerned about inflation, even though it spiked. It wasn't until right around this point where they started to get concerned that inflation was not going to be transitory and it's more entrenched. So you can see as inflation spiked up, what happened to mortgage rates? As it normally would, mortgage rates would normally follow that up, but it didn't. They just kind of remained sideways. The Fed kept their thumb on the scale through what's called quantitative easing through this period. So you can see this little bar here. That's the period where the Fed was purchasing mortgage-backed securities and keeping interest rates artificially low. When the Fed finally figured out that mortgage rates, or I should say inflation, was entrenched and not coming down, they quit buying mortgage-backed securities and treasuries because they had to. And when that happened, look what happened to mortgage rates. They spiked up. And that is why we had the highest rise in mortgage rates in history, because the Fed had their thumb on the scale. And once they took it off, mortgage rates naturally did what they always do. It followed inflation up. And so you can see here that inflation peaked, and then again, a little bit of lag, and we saw mortgage rates peak. And this happened in September and October of last year. And we're starting to see inflation come down, and we're seeing mortgage rates follow it down again. So again, we need to understand that as inflation goes, if the Fed isn't gaming the system and the markets are just working as they naturally should, as inflation goes, so go mortgage rates. And the trend right now is down on inflation. And we can see that in this next chart. So this is the consumer price index, the core consumer price index, which by the way is coming out tomorrow, and we should see a drop in that. That strips out energy and food. And the reason for that is because energy and food are super volatile, and really weather, there's a lot of different things that can affect that. So we strip that out and go to the core consumer price index, and that's what the Fed looks at. That's what we want to look at. And as we look at that, we can see back in October that it came in at 0.3% here. And if we look at October 2021, it actually went up 0.6. So as inflation's moderating, what happens is we drop this number off, this number gets added for the 12-month average. And so the difference between the 0.6 in October, the 0.6 in October of last year, and 0.3 of October this year, inflation dropped 0.3 of a point. Same thing in November. It came in at 0.2. Last November, we dropped off 0.5. Inflation dropped down 0.3. December, is a 6/10. So tomorrow, when we get that number, if we come in at 2/10 on the month for the month of December, we'll see inflation drop 0.4%. If it comes in at 0.3, we'll see it drop 0.3%. So you can see that if we take a look and forecast out into the spring, we have 0.6 for December, 0.6 for January, 0.5 for February. March is going to be maybe a little bit of a tough month, or maybe just maybe we don't see a movement in inflation. But again, 0.6, 0.6, 0.7, August 0.6, 0.6. We have some large numbers here moving forward into the spring and summer of inflation. And if inflation is moderating, which we expect it to do, that means inflation will be coming down, that core number will be coming down, and that means mortgage rates will follow with it. So we think this is going to be a very good trend for rates moving forward into the spring and summertime. One of the things we need to take a look at when we're talking about CPI in the consumer price index, and the core of it is shelter cost. So shelter cost is about 39% of the core CPI. It's actually 39.3%, but rounded off to 39%. And you can see here that rents, according to Apartment List, got as high as 18% year over year in November in 2021 into January. And we're starting to see rents moderate a little bit down to currently about 4.6%. So this is a real-time number. When we get this number from Apartment List, it's a real-time number of what's happening in housing costs for people that are renting. Now, the problem is that CPI is a lagging indicator because it's a 12-month average. So what that means is we have yet to see the shelter costs in the core CPI come down, yet it's actually still rising. We're going to start to see that kind of level out and then follow that down. And once that does, that will accelerate the drop in inflation and accelerate the drop in rates. So it's kind of like a mortgage, it's kind of like a roller coaster. So you can see in a roller coaster, as you're going over the first big hill, here's where the real shelter costs are. They're in the front of the car. And here's where we're at now. But the CPI is yet to catch up to that. Once it does, then that will accelerate again, inflation decreasing and accelerate mortgage rates moving down. So something to understand about index, the core CPI index and its relation to rates. It's a good trend, and we think that's going to continue to move down. So prices have come down across the board for food, gas, clothing, all within the CPI report. Again, shelter costs are lagging, although they're decelerating. And of course, once that lag effect is over, as we just talked about, that again will push that down a little bit quicker. So another thing we need to talk about is the 30-year mortgage rates compared to the 10-year Treasury spread and where that is right now, because it's a little bit stretched out to where it traditionally is. So when we take a look at this chart, we can see that the normal spread is 175 basis points to 200 basis points. And what that means is the spread between whatever the 10-year yield is at the time and mortgage rates is normally within that range. So 1.75% to 2% higher than where the yield is. So for instance, if the 10-year yield is at 3%, normally we see rates around 5%. If it's at 4% or 2%, I should say, then we see mortgage rates around 4%. That's traditionally how it's been. And you can see it's been fairly consistent over time. However, recently that spread has gone from 1.75 to 2% up to 300 basis points or 3%. So why is that? Well, mortgage rates spiked so fast that the value of servicing decreased. And what that means is when you take a look at servicing a loan, so when you sell it, when you close a loan, someone's got to service that loan. So there's a company out there that services that. When someone's got to collect the payments, they've got to make sure that the tax impounds are collected and taxes are paid and insurances are paid and all these different things. The value of that servicing decreases as rates rise. So for instance, if rates are at 4%, that loan is going to be on the books longer than if rates are at 6%. If rates are at 5%, that loan is going to be on the books longer for them than at 7%. So the lower the interest rate, the longer that loan is going to stay on the books because it's less likely to be refinanced. And then the more opportunity the servicer has to make money on it. So as rates spiked up, There's one thing you have to understand about Wall Street. They really understand money, and they understand where money's heading. They understand that in looking at the charts and looking at inflation and looking at the things that they look at, that we look at, that mortgage rates are coming down. So all these loans that have been done in the last year, year and a half, whereas actually in the last year in 2022, they know that these loans are not going to be on their books for very long, which is why last year we saw most mortgage rates had a cost to them. So if a servicer is looking at this and they're saying, well, we're doing a loan at 7%, we think rates are going to be at 4% in the next year or two, this loan's not going to be on our books longer than 12 months, 24 months, 36 months at the most. We're not going to make any money. So they charged a premium up front to do that loan and to service that loan, which is why the spread got a little bit out of whack. Now it's starting to come back down. We're about 2.75 now. But the point is that once the spread starts to get into this, back to this normal range, that will accelerate rates moving down. And we're starting to see that now. So as rates come down, this spread is going to get a little bit more towards where it traditionally is, and that will push mortgage rates down at a faster clip. Another reason we know a recession is coming, and this is a little bit of a scary chart, is you can see what's going on with credit card debt and revolving debt. Revolving debt and credit card debt is skyrocketing. At the same time, personal saving rates are dropping dramatically. So if we take a look at the personal savings rates, we can see that we had stimulus here, stimulus here, stimulus here, and savings rates were in a good spot. And then mortgage rate or credit card balances were actually declining because of these stimulus packages. Once that money ran out, and at the same time, inflation hit and hit people really hard, two things happened. They had to deplete their savings and they started to live on credit card debt. Why? Because they haven't changed their lifestyle. At some point in time, this hits a brick wall. And when it does, that's when a recession is going to happen. People are going to have to start to change how they live and what their lifestyle is like. And we're starting to see that now. Maybe not go out as much, cut back on vacations, things of that nature. And this is when these two things are going in opposite directions, it's a sure sign a recession is on its way. Another reason we know we're going to have a recession this year is the 10-year yield minus its 3 months. So last week we looked at the 10-year yield minus the 2-year yield, and this is the 3-month yield. So the 3-month yield hardly ever inverts, but when it does, it's always been a good indicator of recession, almost a perfect indicator of recession. So you can see in 1990, inverted recession, in 2000s, inverted recession, in 2008 or so, inverted recession, COVID, inverted recession, and we're currently inverted. And so when we see these inversions happen, meaning the 3-month is paying more than the 10-year, normally when you subtract the 3-month from the 10-year, that should be a positive number. But if the 3-year is worth more than the 10-year and you subtract it, it's going to be a negative number. And that's where we are right now. That is almost a perfect indicator of a recession coming. Okay. And we talked a little, and we talked about that in last week's webinar. So mortgage rates and recessions, we looked at this chart last week. I just wanted to reiterate it. Just because we have a recession coming, we need to be able to let our clients know that's not necessarily a bad thing from a rate standpoint. So we can see here, last recession, rates dropped. 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 So when we have recessions, this is a really good indicator that mortgage rates are going to decline. And that creates opportunity, okay? That creates opportunity for us to be able to counsel our clients as to where we think rates are headed and what may be coming for them, so we can properly counter that negative narrative coming from the media. And housing usually stays strong through recessions. We can see that from this chart, and we looked at this last week again, and we want to look at it again. Housing typically appreciates through recessions. The only time it didn't was in 2008 when our industry caused it to crash. Now, we had a completely different market then. Right now, we're in a little bit low inventory market. We still have good demand. In 2000, going into 2008, we had declining demand and we had increasing inventory. And we also had really loose lending standards. A lot of subprime loans, a lot of loans that were 100% financing. You really didn't need to qualify on income. Just really not a good environment from a housing standpoint. It created a bubble, it crashed. So other than 2008, homes have typically appreciated through the recession. Now, why is that? Because if we understand what happens in a recession, recessions affect the low end to moderate end of the market before it affects middle income to higher income people. And so those people that can afford to buy a house, when they see rates move down, they look at it as opportunity. They jump back into the market. We see increased demand through lower rates, and that's why housing typically appreciates through a recession. This next chart is actually, I want to spend a couple of minutes on it because it's a really, really good chart. And if you take a look at this is the months of inventory of homes for sale. And if we go back towards the housing market crash in 2011, you can see how long homes were sitting on the market, 8.5, 9.5 months on the market before they're sold. That just speaks to two things. One, a lot of inventory in the market, and two, not enough demand in the market, which is why homes were sitting during this time. And as you can see from 2011, that's been dropping down consistently to now we're about 2.5 to 3 months of homes on the market. So what that tells you is that we have increasing demand for housing and we have decreasing inventory for housing. So it's a completely different market than it was back in 2008 all the way into 2011. The other thing I wanted you to understand in this chart is if you take a look at this, you can see that in January, we have this dip, and then when we come into the spring and summer months, we have an increase in inventory. In 2013, we see the same thing. In 14, again, 15, January into the summer, inventory increases, January to summer, January to summer, January to summer. The same pattern repeats itself every single year. It's like clockwork. We understand that inventory is going to increase up here moving into the summertime as people get their house prepared to sell. During that time frame of March into April, May, June, July, that's our prime selling season. That's when we see the most inventory in the market. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see depreciation in homes as more inventory comes in the market. Why? Because if we have decreasing mortgage rates and increasing demand, that excess supply will get sopped up pretty quickly. So understand that and be able to communicate that to your clients is really a huge thing. So again, more homes for sale during the spring and summertime, but also can be more demand. And it could still be supportive of pricing if we have enough demand in the market. So housing supply is tight due to demographics. And we can see from this chart, back in the housing market era, we had builders were building, as you can see from these yellow lines, it's the annual completions, and then household growth was actually starting to decline from 2005 into 6 into 7. So that shows you that supply and demand difference. And you can see how different it is in today's market where it's flipped. We have more supply or less supply and more demand going in today's market. So we were in a completely different market from 2008 than we are today. And these blue bars speak of birth rates. And if you understand birth rates, you can forecast out where demand may be heading. So one thing I want you to take a look at here is in 2005, the average person purchases their first house around age 32. So age 32 is when that first home gets bought typically. That's typically the number or the age. So if we understand that what happened 32 years earlier, we can then forecast out and figure out where demand is heading. So in 2005, 32 years earlier, Roe v. Wade was passed, and then we saw a decrease in birth rates all the way in for the next 8-9 years. You forecast that out 32 years later, and that's where we got the decreasing demand in housing through 2008 and going into 2010, 11, and 12. And then if you take a look at 2018, 32 years earlier from that was 1985, which is the beginning of a birth boom in the millennial generation. And you can see how that's actually supported housing and supported demand. And that is going to continue on for a few years. And right behind them is the Gen Z generation, which is another big generation. So demand for housing should be fairly consistent moving forward. We're not going to see that dip like we did back in 2006, 7, and 8 down to these levels, because we had such big housing, we had such big boom and bursts back in 85 into the 90s, and then again into the 2000s with the Gen Z generation. So demand for housing should remain constant. And then, of course, what happens with builders and inventory, that's going to remain to be seen. So if we take a look at housing supply, housing starts completed about 1.5 million annually. Okay. But that's only part of the picture. We have to account for the fact that annually about 100,000 homes actually come out of the market because of aging or demolition, things of that nature. So while we have housing starts at about 1.5 million, we lose about 100,000 homes each year. That puts our new supply about 1.4 million. Now, currently household formations are about 1.3 million. But as we talked about, if rates move down and we see an increase in demand, which we should with the rates moving down, our demand, actually our household formations can go from 1.3 to 1.7. And now we're $300,000 short of a new home supply that we need. So again, when we take a look at these numbers and understand what they mean, we can then really talk to our clients about the fact that, yes, there is inventory in the market, but that may shift back to where now, if we don't have enough inventory in the market to meet demand, we're back into multiple offer situations and things of that nature. So if we can understand where the market is heading, we can then prepare for that ahead of time and prepare our clients for that ahead of time to make sure that we let them know and advise them properly that either now is a really good time to purchase a house because there's less demand out there, or if they do decide to wait, just so they understand where the market is heading, that they may be in a situation where it's a little bit more competitive. So one of the reasons we have a short supply is builders are still cautious from their lessons of 2006 and 2009. They don't want to get into a situation where they overbuilt. So they're still kind of cautious in that standpoint. Is a home price crash coming? We hear a lot from the media about a crash coming, or they equate this market to 2008. Well, when we really take a look at it, it's a completely different market, as we talked about, just from a supply and demand standpoint. But really, if we look at a lot of different other aspects of it, it's a different market. Job cuts, net gains of losses in the last housing cycle was 8 million. And currently it's about flat. And then payrolls were about 130 million in the last housing cycle. It's currently about 153 million. Total jobs about 138 million last time around. We're about 158 million now. In 2008, going into the crash, subprime loans were very prevalent. They were pretty much the dominant on the market. And now virtually none of the loans get done are subprime loans. In fact, 90% of what we do out there, in fact, over 90% of what we do is 30-year fixed rate mortgages, very straight, very vanilla, very strong loans. The 5-year cumulative new home construction back in 2008 was 7.65 million. It's currently about 4.6 million. So again, speaks to lower inventory. Inventory in the market, we can see here 3.8 to 4 million last time around. We're down to about 1 to 1.4 million in that range currently. Delinquencies on mortgages were over 10%, and now they're only 3.6%. Homes and foreclosures were 4.6, and now it's really 0.6. That speaks to how strong the loans we've been doing lately with ability to repay and 30-year fixed rate mortgage and qualifying people to make sure they're in loans that are paying principal and interest and paying their mortgage down and amortizing their loans. That's why we have such low delinquencies and low homes and foreclosures. So we have to be able to counsel our clients, especially those that want to get a deal on a foreclosed house. That may or may not be the best strategy for them because it's very, very short on homes and foreclosures. So home price moderation, if you hear the media, the market's crashing, prices are crashing, but let's really take a look at the truth of it. Over the last 10 years, we've appreciated about 115%. And if we look at the last 2 years, it's actually 39% in the last 2 years that homes have appreciated. And now once we hit this peak, we're actually down about 2.5% from the peak. So when we take a look at the level of appreciation over the last 10 years and how much we've declined, it really isn't much. And that's, again, we have to be able to counter that negative narrative out there with the media and make sure that people understand where the market is and where it's heading. So we expect as the rates move down and we see the selling season heat up in the springtime here and demand move up, that we will start to see this level off and then again start to appreciate up again. The other thing that we need to talk about is affordability, because the media is pounding affordability right now. Okay. And they only give us half the story. So if we take a look at 2021, we have a loan of $400,000 at 3.5% rate, which is where it was at the time towards the end of 2021. The mortgage payment at that time was $1,796 for the P&I payment. Now, in 2022, we averaged about 10% appreciation. So now we have a mortgage of $440,000. The interest rates moved up to 6.25%. And the monthly payment jumped up to $2,709 or $913 more than it was in 2021. That's a big increase. That's about a 33% increase in the payment. And that's where the media stops. But they're only giving us half the story. And we can't really stop there. And so this is what we need to talk to our clients about in affordability. We have to take that next step to make sure they have the right information. So one of the things that media never looks at and our clients never hear about because of the media is household income. So if you had two people in 2021, a husband and a wife, or two people in a household, each making $54,000 a year, that's about $9,000 a month. According to ADP, those people last year, if they stayed in their position, they averaged about a 7.6% increase in their income. And if they switched jobs, they averaged about 15.1% increase in their income. But there was more stayers and switchers. So we can't just kind of take that average and cut it in half. We have to take a weighted average. So the weighted average on that is about 9%. So if we have a 9% increase in payroll, that's $810,000 or $9,810 now for 2022 in income that we didn't have in 2021. So now that increase in that payment looks a little bit easier to manage. But that's only part of the story as well. As we all know, inflation really heated up in 2022, which raised the cost across the board for a lot of different things for people. So if we take a look at the average, and ADP had these numbers, if we take a look at the average family, their gasoline costs went up $89 a month. Their food costs went up $79 a month, and services up about $73 a month. So now that $913 increase is $1,154 per month increase. We didn't quite get enough income to cover that. But if we have only a 5% increase this year, then their income would now move from $9,000 to $10,300. That's a $1,300 increase, which would absorb that $1,154. Now let's take a look at next year. Assuming that we have kind of flat growth next year, and we have a loan of $440,000, and let's say we have a rate of 5% in 2023, that monthly payment would be $2,362, or an increase of $807 from the 2021 payment, and they have $1,300 more in income. So when we talk about affordability, we have to take the income component into account when we're talking to our clients and counsel them properly, because the media is only giving them half the story. Our clients don't really understand that as they increase their income, what's happening in the housing market can be absorbed. And as rates move down, it's going to get easier for them to absorb that increase of payment from where rates were maybe in 2021. So let's get to our housing forecast. So for housing, we think there's going to be lower inflation. We've already looked at the charts and why we think that's going to happen. A recession-like slowdown, and actually really a full-blown recession coming. Income's increasing to help affordability. We just kind of went over that through ADP's numbers. We have a very tight housing inventory environment. I think that remains. And then rents are still going to be very expensive for clients. Okay. So we think that we're going to have low to mid single digit appreciation for most of 2023 for most of the US, with a pickup in activity. So as rates move down, we expect activity in the housing market to pick up. Our mortgage rate forecast, we have some headwinds. We have global quantitative tightening, meaning the central banks around the world are doing the same thing our Fed Reserve is doing, and that is raising their funds rates in order to combat inflation. Now, they're typically anywhere from 2 to 4 months behind us, so they still have some tightening to do in the first part of the year, and that could cause a little bit of headwinds for mortgage rates. There's also a lack of foreign central bank buying, which is a big part of our mortgage-backed securities and treasuries, is central banks buying, and they're not buying as much as they were in the past because of everything happening in the markets. And then there's more debt to be financed. Congress just passed a $1.7 billion omnibus bill that has to be absorbed. And so they have to issue treasuries to pay for that. And that excess supply has to be absorbed in the market. So those are some headwinds we have for mortgage rates moving forward. However, we have some good tailwinds. The first one is lower inflation. So as we talked about, inflation is moderating. We expect it to continue to moderate moving forward. And that is very supportive of lower rates moving forward. We have excess retail inventory. So the retailers out there are sitting on a lot of inventory. The supply chain has been basically, worked through here. The point now they have too much inventory in they're sitting on, and they have to put that product on sale. So we're going to see more sales this year, more inventory move through sales, maybe some deep discounts. And so once we see those sales prices happening and that retail inventory move through sales, that's deflationary. That helps inflation. So we expect the excess inventory to help mortgage rates and to help inflation move down further. Increase in mortgage servicing value, we talked about that further. Once that spread goes from 3% back down to its more normal level of 1.75 to 2%, probably will happen in the first part of the year. That's going to, again, accelerate mortgage rates moving down. And then recession likely, rates decline during recessions. We've already shown that every time there's a recession, mortgage rates move down. So for interest rates, we see 30-year fixed rate mortgages rates moving near 5% in the first half of 2023. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them dip underneath that moving forward. So if that mortgage servicing value drops back down into the 1.75 to 2% range, and we can see here, we expect the 10-year to get down near 3% or lower. So if it gets down to 3% and we get back to a normal spread, we're at a 5% rate. And if it gets down to 2.75, we're going to see rates anywhere between 4.5% to 4.75%, maybe in the later half of the year. So that's our thought process on that. So again, to kind of button some things up here, we're dealing with a crisis in real estate today, but it's more of an information crisis and not a housing crisis. So we need to be the counterbalance to that negative news cycle that is just so pertinent in our industry right now. And so there's a formula that we talked about last week, and I want to kind of reiterate that. It's education plus confidence plus positivity is going to equal more transactions. Again, let me rephrase that. Education plus confidence plus positivity is going to equal into more transactions. So if we can educate our clients with confidence and be positive about our markets, and we should be positive about where housing and rates are heading, that's going to lead us to more transactions for our clients. And that's why we're here today. We're just not here to share 45 minutes of some really good information and just kind of say, here you go on your way. We're here to change the way that you think and the way that you provide information to your clients. We need to provide the inspiration needed to confidently advise our clients in 2023. If you need assistance in this, just schedule time with me. If you have clients that you need to advise, but you're not sure exactly how to advise them, I'd be happy to help you and be happy to jump on a phone call with you with the client or a Zoom call with the client. And we can go through this with your clientele to make sure that they're getting the right information, the proper information, so that they can make a good decision on housing in 2023. So next week, we are going to look at a first time. We're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to kind of get away from all these charts and all these numbers and all these different things we've been looking at. We're going to actually look at a first time home buyer webinar, and I'm going to walk you through it. And the point is so that you can go out there and start to build your business. And I think first time home buyers in 2023 are going to be key. And the reason I say that is if we look at our databases, we see a lot of our clients are still in a 2.5%, 3%, 3.5% rate. They're not ready to really take a look at moving up or moving down when their rate is so low just yet. Now, as rates move down, those opportunities will start to come. But right now, I think the mindset for most of our clients that are in houses is kind of stay put to see where the market goes. So that means first-time home buyers are going to be key this year in 2023. I think it's a really strong market to take a look at, and probably an underserved market, because a lot of times when we take a look at first-time home buyers, people don't really want to work with them. I absolutely love to work with first-time home buyers, and I'll tell you why. Because if you work with somebody to get them into their first home and you do a great job with them and you advise them properly and they get into that house and they're extremely happy, you have a client for life. And then they also tell their friends. They're excited about their first house. They're excited to tell their friends. There's more opportunity for referral business. So first-time home buyers, we're going to go through that webinar. I'm going to allow you guys to, not allow you guys, that's not the right word, but I'm going to walk you guys through is what I meant to say, so that you can take this webinar out to your clients. And if you don't want to do the webinar, no problem. I'd be happy to do it. So if you, or maybe 3 or 4 of your realtor colleagues, want to put a webinar on and invite your client base to this webinar, I'd be happy to do the webinar for you. We can schedule that. So just get with me. But we're going to actually walk through the webinar so that you can kind of get an idea of what it is. And then you can utilize this into your business to grow your first-time home buyer business in 2023. So that'll be next week at 2 p.m., same time, next Wednesday. We're going to walk through that. And again, please invite any realtors or anybody else you may know, office managers, brokers, to these webinars. We'd be happy to have them on there. So I want to thank you all very much for attending. Again, please invite your colleagues to next week's webinar. Our goal is to provide fresh and relevant information to you that will allow you to have massive success in 2023. That's my point, and that's my goal. And we want to share that with our colleagues. If you share this with your colleagues or your broker, your office manager, it shows that you care about them, and it shows that you want to help them out as well. So again, please share this information. And let's all partner together to really make a push this year to change the narrative in our real estate and mortgage industry through better education with confidence and positivity. With that, we are done. I'll take any questions right now if anybody has any. No questions? All right. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for attending. We're going to get the recording out to you here tomorrow. We'll get the invite out to next week's webinar on Friday. And again, share that. Please feel free to just push that out and share that. And if you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. Please reach out. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.